and I left Peace Corps about 4 months after graduation. And then like I said, so I was a conservation and natural resource management volunteer. I studied business administration and marketing. What you guys don't have to worry about, but back then you accepted what you got. So I had no idea what environment meant in conservation and natural resource. I was like, it has the word management, so maybe that is business related, but other than that, I wasn't sure. My program switched to agriculture, which is something that I was interested in. And so it was more food security related. It was more about people versus planting trees. So that was much more just in line with what I was interested in. And then my third year, I extended with Catholic Relief Services. And with them, I was working on USAID, which is like funded projects, $80 million projects to support people with disabilities, women, children, and youth, ensuring that they were being included throughout the project, especially people with disabilities, because they were quite often excluded and looked at as you can only give them money, but they can't work to get food, which is how the project was designed. I grew up in a home where my family was, it was typical, I think, now that I'm looking back amongst a lot of people who are Black Americans, where they surround you in things that are African in a sense, but they don't really know where it's from. So we have African art, but we don't know where it's from, but they want to have that tie to Africa in that sense of like, you know, this is where we originally came, but we don't know, but this is where we originally came from, and I want you to feel that cultural tie. My family introduced me to Kwanzaa. Then my mom had me speaking Swahili classes from church. She was just like, you're gonna know something. And I remember growing up and feeling like a little envious of my friends who had a tie outside of America. I think because of the history of Black Americans here, there's a little bit of that you're not fully accepted into America kind of feel sometimes, but at the same time you don't have somewhere else to call your home. So it's that, you know, love-hate relationship within America, but I don't have that other tie, culture, language, or something else that I can say, but this is still where I originally came from. So that was something that I always wanted. I wanted to speak another language or just feel that kind of tie to Africa, and that's what led me to Peace Corps. Many other reasons, but that's specifically what led me to Africa. I was like, I want to be placed in Africa. I don't care where. She literally was like, what country? I was like, wherever you want to send me, I just want to go. It doesn't matter if it's not the place where I grew up. I just want to feel that tie, that even if it wasn't where my ancestors lived, I know a culture, I know a language, I know something that's linked to the continent. So that's where I went. She was like, I got my invitation. Like I said, you couldn't reject back then. So, or you couldn't say, oh no, let me figure out something else. So I was an environment volunteer and until we switched to agriculture. And I want to start by saying that my success in service started with an unsuccessful project. I'll explain what that means a bit more, but I've learned that in America I would say that we are so top heavy to believe in SMART goals and that we're afraid to fail, and we look for tangible results. So everything we do, we're like, how can I prove that we did it, or what does my success look like? And being there, and I'll talk about it more later, I had some failures, and I don't think that I had that up until then. I went to college. I did everything I was supposed to do, so I can't say that I could say I failed in something before that. So when I moved to my town, I was told by volunteers that, you know, people are just going to come to you left and right, and they're going to introduce themselves, and they're going to want to meet you. It's just going to be so easy. When I moved to my town, because they assumed that I was Ethiopian, just, you know, one of those city girls visiting a family, it was a little bit more like, all right, so I don't know who you are, but hey, you know, like it wasn't, that excitement wasn't necessarily there that first few weeks. So what I did is I was more proactive. A volunteer told me that would happen, that, you know, you're going to need to be a little bit more proactive so that people know that you're a volunteer, know that you're Peace Corps, know that you're a foreigner. And so I would sit in the same cafe every day at the same time. And every day, people would come and I would introduce myself. I would tell them who I was. I would tell them about Peace Corps. I would do things to where people would meet me, and gradually people talk in your towns or small towns. So they're not used to, like, necessarily foreigners just coming through. So I start telling them, like, hey, there's this girl. She looks just like us, but she's actually Black American is how they would describe me. And no one had met someone like me before. There was a lot of questions about, okay, well, you might be American, but what are your grandparents? Or what are your parents? Or what are your, I would have to go explain my whole ancestry. Or I would go like, oh, okay, well, I'm like Obama. No, Obama is Kenyan. His father is Kenyan. Okay, well, that doesn't really count for me. I can't say that. So there was a lot of like, who are you and how do you define yourself that I had to figure out and figure out how I would answer that question. So as people started to get to know me and I made a few friends, I started to feel a little confident, like, all right, I can do a project now. I'm integrated. People wave at me when they see me, so I can do this. I got this. So I started this project that I had a counterpart. I did everything that Peace Corps told me to do. I had a counterpart in the community. He was like, yes, let's do it. And we're trying to do something with a big co-op. So a lot of farmers. It started with 20 people that we were going to benefit and they were going to get money and I was going to change the world. And it became 160 people that were going to benefit from the same project. And I was like, yeah, that's okay. If you believe we can do it, I believe we can do it. So I was like, yeah. And then I started noticing that there was infighting, which I didn't know happens quite often in co-ops. But there were things about, well, I'm from here and you're from there. And there were issues that I didn't know at the time. And my counterpart, what you'll see can happen is sometimes they want to please you. So at the same time I'm looking at him like, you'll tell me when we can't do this. He's looking at me like, you'll tell me when you think we can't do this. And so we continue on and on and on. And eventually I'm like, hey, I think that with the amount of people we have in this project, I'm only gonna make like 5 cents. And 5 cents more than they were making before. And with all this fighting, we can't make decisions. And each meeting becomes, we have to meet again to talk about the last thing we just met about because now, we didn't figure it out. I had to actually come to a point, and then my counterpart got another job because there's high turnover and they're always looking for the next better job, at least there in Ethiopia. So I had to look at the project and say, can I keep doing this? And it was a very, very difficult thing to do because I had made promises, and it's not that I was telling them I was going to change their life, but I did come into their life and disrupt it in a sense of, I think we can do something. It was a failure. I just have to admit, it was a failed project. So at that time, it's slow. I don't know what my work is anymore. I don't know what I'm here and what I'm going to do, and it was a difficult time because I don't know. It was you're facing these challenges and you're trying to figure out how you're gonna fix this situation. And that's when I started to take a step back. I refocused on integration because I think that some of the things now looking back, I would have learned about the community had I realized, things like, okay, you need to understand the dynamics. And keep in mind, now I'm talking about a year into my service. I think that people think 3 months in, you know the things you need to know. We're talking about a year into my service before I really start to understand more things about my town. So I start teaching English on the side. And you're doing projects, but you start to really focus on, okay, let me get to know people. And eventually people start coming up to you with more realistic ideas of like, let's do this. And you understand more about the community and you're like, yeah, I think we can shape it this way. And I can tell you projects that I did that were successful. I was working on a gardening project that focused on 10 to 15 women in my town, and we were working to specifically focus on HIV positive women. And we established gardens. I did all these things. I would not call that my success in my town. So often people focus on that first goal of doing projects in your town, and I want to switch that. If I leave you with anything, I want to make sure you understand that it's really about the second and the third. The relationships that you build and you bring home, the things that you change within yourself, and those are the things that I find success. And that's not something that's necessarily measurable. I will never know the impact that I had with the people there, but I know I still get phone calls, and I've been back for more than a year. I've been back probably about 2 years now, and I still get phone calls from my community. I know that when my friend is trying to tell me, I would say one of my days of success was when my friend was trying to explain to me that her mother-in-law was pressuring her to have female genital mutilation operation on her daughter. And she's confiding in me, and I'm talking to her about, okay, I'm doing the culturally appropriate signs and these different things to let her know that I feel her pain, but she trusted me with that kind of information. That's how I define my success in my service. So I had to re-look at what were moments to me that I felt like I actually became one with the community, and it didn't become I was acting or pretending or doing something because I was told to do it, but because it just became a part of me. Became my reactions of, the wayne and all these different responses became that is what I was used to doing because I've now become one of the community.